DIY Mitzvahs series where we talk about a mitzvah each week and try to understand what it's all about and how we can actually do it ourselves and get this mitzvah done. So the story goes how a Jew from Israel who was somewhat more knowledgeable in the Torah and its laws visits a friend of his in the United States, and he gives him a gift of a Mezuzah. He gets back to Israel, and he sometime later calls his friend and asks him how he likes the Mezuzah. He says, "Oh, the Mezuzah is beautiful. I put it up on the front door. I love the Mezuzah. Thank you so much." Now, knowing that his American friend was perhaps not so well versed in Jewish tradition, so this Israeli Jew just checks and he says, what about the scroll inside? Did you put it up together with the Mezuzah? He says, the what? You mean the scroll that was inside the case? It's, oh, you mean the warranty? I threw it in the garbage. What do I need the warranty for a Mezuzah? Hi, Vladimir. So, of course, a Mezuzah is not about the case as much as it is about the scroll inside. And that scroll is not the warranty, nor the instructions, nor anything else. That scroll is what makes the Mezuzah the Mezuzah. And the case is really just to hold it. So if you look here, you have what you might see in any good Judaica store, all kinds of different Mezuzahs. Cases of every shape and size, colors, materials. Pick your choice. Some of them are beautiful. Some of them are unique, each in their own way. And there are so many Mezuzahs to choose from. But the most important thing is the scroll. On this particular Mezuzah, you can see the scroll through the case. The most important part is the scroll that's inside. And it's really disappointing and painful in my line of work when you visit someone and you say, let's check out the Mezuzahs. How long has it been since you put them up? And you open up the Mezuzahs only to find that there's nothing inside, or that there is a piece of paper inside and not an actual handwritten kosher Mezuzah with all the rules that we'll discuss. And it's such a shame that somebody thought they had the Mezuzah on the door and they were doing it right all along, but actually they were missing out on a mitzvah all this time. So what is this very well-known but often misunderstood or not properly observed mitzvah of Mezuzah? Let's start where it begins, which is when the Torah tells us the mitzvah of actually doing this. So what does the Torah say? This is part of the Shema prayer. We read this every day, and this tells us the commandment of Mezuzah, among others. And these words, which I command you this day, shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them to your sons, and speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, they shall be for ornaments between your eyes. So these words, the words of the Torah, the words that God is telling us of the Shema, of the belief in the oneness of God, they shall be bound on your arms and placed on your heads. That's, of course, the tefillin. And you shall inscribe them upon the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. Referring to the mitzvah of Mezuzah. Put these words on your doorposts, put these words on your gates. This is what we now know as Mezuzah, because of course the oral Torah, as we have it in the Talmud, the explanation of the Torah that Moshe gave along with the Torah itself, gave us all the details how to actually implement this writing. We don't actually write on the wall, but we put it on a scroll, we attach a scroll to the wall, etc., etc. In fact, in this case, in the case of this particular mitzvah, there are numerous laws and a lot of specific details to getting it right. So a mezuzah, the actual scroll of the mezuzah, before it gets rolled up to go in the little tube, or the whatever shape case might be, the actual scroll looks like this. Now this is actually a quite high quality mezuzah, very well written, but the image has been doctored for purpose of using it. As you look here on the third word, the letters that would make it form the name of God were slightly edited, so the name of God should not appear in its completion. The same goes throughout the whole mezuzah. That's not the way it's actually done, but that's the way it's prepared for observation and for us to just learn about. Anyhow, this is the mezuzah. You have over here two sections, as you see, two paragraphs. That's the Shema paragraph, and the following, V'hoya im Shemaya, another section of the Torah that we read every day together with the Shema. Both of these sections speak about the love of God, our commitment, and our special relationship with God. And both of these sections mention the actual commandment of the mezuzah. Now notice that this is not a paper. As hopefully you can tell from the image here, this is not regular paper, but this is parchment. Parchment, so prepared from a kosher animal hide. And this calligraphy that you see here, making out these beautiful Hebrew letters, is handwritten. So if it's on paper, it's not kosher. If it's printed on your laser jet, inkjet, 3D printer, whatever it is you have, it's also not kosher. It's got to be handwritten on the parchment with a particular quill and with many, many other details that go along with it. Each of these letters is prepared perfectly. If it's a little off shape, then it will resemble a different letter and no longer be kosher. If there won't be enough space between two words, it would no longer be kosher. If the words would be too close and look like one word, it wouldn't be kosher, etc., etc., etc. Notice there are crowns on the letters and many, many other details that come with it. Now, for us to get a kind of whirlwind taste of what goes into preparing a kosher mezuzah, we'll look at this little video clip, which will tell us at high speed, shall we say, the writing and preparation of a mezuzah. So here we go. All right, so at least we get a little taste of the exacting craft that it is to make a mezuzah, and then of course ship it off. We couldn't miss that part of the video and put it up on the door. So what is the purpose of a mezuzah? Whoops. Something else going on here.
From the techno-kabbalists who brought you Fivel Pro, MT Therapy, Power to Fill-In, and Super Suckers, now comes the ultimate in home and office security, the Mighty Mezuzah. Every Mighty Mezuzah comes packaged with its own dedicated remote connection to the terrestrial life security agency of Heaven Incorporated. Just connect your house with the required number of mezuzahs, one per doorway, and tiny Hebrew letters intricately configured.
There we go. Got that quieter. So the mezuzah, what's the purpose of the mezuzah? Why do we do this? So of course we do this because it's a mitzvah. As we just read, the Torah commands us to put the mezuzah on our doors, and we do so in fulfillment of that mitzvah. But we also know, like many other mitzvahs, what this mitzvah accomplishes, what this mitzvah can teach us. So let us see. We read here in Maimonides, in the Rambam, the impact of a mezuzah. And Rambam writes, a person must show great care in the observance of the mitzvah of mezuzah because it is an obligation constantly incumbent upon everyone. Through its observance, whenever a person enters or leaves the house, he will encounter the unity of the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, and remember his love for him. Thus he will awake from his sleep and his obsession with the vanities of time and recognize that there is nothing that lasts for eternity except the knowledge of the creator of the world. This will motivate him to regain full awareness and follow the paths of the upright. In other words, life is life. It's busy, it's complicated, there's a lot going on, there's a lot to overwhelm us, there's a lot to confuse us sometimes, there's a lot to let us lose focus. The mezuzah is there as a reminder. The mezuzah is at the door, so every time we come, every time we go, we see the mezuzah has that scroll. Those two passages from the Torah we saw inside, words, letters proclaiming God's name, and our relationship and our commitment to God. So we constantly remember that wherever we go. So as Rambam says, we awaken from our slumber, from our being lost in the rush of life, or whatever it is that overwhelms us. We remember who we are, what we're trying to do, and how we should be living our lives. So Mezuzah is there to keep us connected, to remind us of God's presence and our connection to him. And then there is also an important idea within Mezuzah, and that is that a Mezuzah is a protection. The Mezuzah is some kind of security on our doors. We put the Mezuzah on the door and it provides protection to the inhabitants of the home. How do we know this? Well, it begins with a Talmudic story. The story is quite unique, shall we say? And let's read it. Onkelos, son of Clonimus, converted. So Onkelos is actually nephew of the Roman Caesar Titus, but he converted to Judaism. When Titus, outraged by the conversion of his nephew to Judaism, sent legionaries after him, Onkelos expounded verses and they were so affected they themselves converted. So this Roman nobleman, nephew to the Caesar, converts to Judaism. He became a great scholar who wrote actually a translation of the Torah in Aramaic, which we still use to this very day because it not only translates, but informs us a lot of the meaning of the verses along the way. So the Romans would have none of it, and Titus sent soldiers to bring this Onkelos back. Well, Onkelos actually converted the soldiers who came after him, convinced them to abandon the Romans and become Jewish as well. This happened several times. As you see the three dots here, skipping a part of the passage here, this happened again. And finally, Caesar again sent legionaries after Onkelos. He told them, do not discuss anything with him. Just grab him and go. Because once they get into conversation, Onkelos was too good at convincing everybody to convert. So as the legionaries took Onkelos with them, he placed his hand upon the mezuzah on the doorway and asked them, what is this? So he kind of flipped the question on them. What is this? Well, they obviously don't know, and they said, you tell us. So he told them, the accepted practice, of a mortal king is that he sits inside while his servants stand guard outside. A typical king is inside the palace, and the servants and the security is outside, providing the protection for the king that's inside. God, however, has his servants, meaning us, inside, while he guards them from outside. As is stated, God should guard you going out and you're coming in from now and forevermore. So God doesn't sit inside and have us serve him. God has us put the mezuzah on the door, and his presence and his divine name provide protection for us while we're inside. These words may touch a profound impression on legionaries that they too converted to Judaism. After this, Caesar did not attempt to send for him again, and the game was over. He gave up on ever bringing Onkelos back. So we know from this Talmudic story the idea that a mezuzah is a protection. Mezuzah is God's presence, the godly connection protecting us from outside our homes so that we and everybody in our homes are safe and shielded. This is also represented in a Kabbalistic way by something the Zohar tells us about how we read the word mezuzah. So mezuzah, got this in the way. Mezuzahs, it would actually spell out two words, zaz, mavet. Mezuzot, you can break it down into zuz for zaz, and mavet, if you play around with the Hebrew letters. Well, zaz mavet means the death moves over. In other words, you move away death, move away destruction, move away such a terrible tragedy, and no death coming this way. This will be a blessed home and a blessed place. So mezuzah does provide protection to the inhabitants of the home. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe spoke about this very, very much, and always encouraged people to put up mezuzahs, and especially to have their mezuzahs inspected, because mezuzahs, being as they are written in ink on the parchment, they do crack or fade over time and become non-kosher, even if they started off kosher. Mezuzahs can be placed wrong, as we'll discuss, and mezuzahs in some cases weren't even kosher to begin with, and the unsuspecting consumer didn't know. So the Rebbe encouraged people to put up mezuzahs, and especially to check their mezuzahs, make sure they're actually kosher. When people had trouble in life, the Rebbe would say, check the mezuzah, and often it turned out something was wrong with the mezuzah. Once I was corrected, the blessing returned. This was especially emphasized in an incident that occurred in 1974, just about when the Rebbe started to campaign about the mezuzahs. And this incident is a very tragic one. It's expressed by this picture. This is the Ma'alot massacre. The Ma'alot massacre was a terrorist attack in Israel in 1974, where a number of terrorists infiltrated from Lebanon, and after killing some people along the way, took about 100 students in this Ma'alot school hostage. The IDF broke in to free them, but unfortunately, in this particular occasion, it was not a great success. And before they managed to kill all the terrorists, more than 20 of the hostages were killed. Obviously, this was very bitter. This is known in Israel as Ason Ma'alot, the catastrophe of the massacre of the town of Ma'alot. The Rebbe spoke about this a while later and mentioned how they had gone, by the Rebbe's encouragement, to check the mezuzahs on the doors of this school. And it turned out that 17 mezuzahs or so, I'm forgetting the exact number, were not kosher, which was initially the number of victims. But then as some more of the individuals died from their wounds, they went back and discovered 4 more of mezuzahs that hadn't been checked, and 3 of them were not kosher. And as the number of the casualty count went up, it turned out there were more mezuzahs that weren't kosher. So the protection was missing, and unfortunately, a tragedy unfolded. Now, the Rebbe followed up on this a couple weeks later, because complaints came in. People kind of misunderstood, and they said, are you suggesting that God punished them for not having a kosher mezuzah and killed them? Is not having a mezuzah a death sentence? And the Rebbe said, no, you don't understand. The children, the students, were killed by terrorists. That's how they died. This was an act of terrorism, barbarism. This was terrible. However, in life, there are things that can protect us. Ride a motorcycle, wear a helmet. The helmet can protect you, as well as in other situations. These students were missing their helmet, which was the mezuzah. When the attack came, the helmet may have protected them from the attack, but it was unfortunately missing. So nobody wants to suggest that lack of a mezuzah is going to cause a tragedy, or unkosher mezuzah is going to cause a tragedy, God forbid. But a mezuzah serves as our helmet. A mezuzah provides protection, and we don't want to go about life without that protection. Now, the story, out of all the many stories of the Rebbe telling people to check their mezuzahs and really seeing miracles once the mezuzah was corrected, I chose one to show us in a video clip, both because it's so astounding, as well as because it emphasizes the uniqueness of a mezuzah. The mezuzah is not like your home security system from ADT or anyone else that protects you at home, but a mezuzah actually provides protection for the individual, for the family, wherever they may be. It's almost like your insurance policy, which covers you anywhere. And that's illustrated in this unique story of how correcting a mezuzah saved the day. Let's see.
Then I went again spiritual dimension.
Precious somehow. You have a family.
An excerpt from the groundbreaking new film by Jewish Educational Media, A Glimpse Through the Veil, Wondrous Stories of the Rebbe. Rabbi Yitzhak David Grossman is Chief Rabbi of Migdal HaEmek, Israel. Founder and Dean of the Migdal Or Educational Institutions, which school thousands of underprivileged and at-risk children and teens, he is a recipient of the Israel Prize, the country's highest honor.
הבת שלי, חיה רבקה, הבת הבכורה, כשהייתה בגיל 16, חוזרת מהבית ספר עם עין נפוחה. חשבנו שזה כלום, עין נפוחה. אבל דבר התפתח והתפתח, והעין נהיה ממש לא סתם נפוך, עם מוגלה, עם דם. התחלנו ללכת לרופאים, בהתחלה לרופאים פה באזור שלנו, אחר כך בבית חולים בחיפה, תל אביב, הדסה ירושלים, וככה בערך 7 חודשים היינו אצל כל גדולי הרפואים. רופא אחד אומר שזה עין, רופא שני אומר שזה האור, אחר אומר שזה אלרגיה, הרופאים שלא יודעים, אז הם מחפשים אלרגיה, לא להתרחץ פה, לא להתרחץ פה. ובתוך כל אותו הזמן כתבתי כמה וכמה פעמים לרבי לבקש ברכה בשביל הבת שלי. הייתי בארצות הברית, ומישהו אמר לי שיש לו ידיד, חבר, קוראים לו דוקטור גרינגלס, שהוא רופא מומחה לעיניים, כדאי שאני אתייעץ איתו.
Dr. Albert Hornblass, a world-renowned Jewish modern Orthodox ophthalmologist and professor, was chairman of the Department of Ophthalmic Plastic Surgery at the Manhattan Eye, Ear, and Throat Hospital, and a surgeon and consultant at the New York Eye and Ear Infirmary. He passed away in 2007.
הלכתי לפרופסור גרינגלס, התייעצתי איתו, הוא אמר שהוא לא יכול לענות לי בעל פה, אף על פי שיש לו את המסמכים, הוא צריך שהיא תבוא לבד. צלצלתי לבית וביקשתי שמיד יסדרו לה טיסה, כרטיס, ויזה, ושתבוא מיד לארצות הברית. היא הגיעה לפנות בוקר, הטיסה הייתה ב-6 בבוקר, הגיעה לניו יורק, אומרת לי הבת, אני רוצה לראות את הרבי. אני לא יכולה, היא מיד רוצה לראות את הרבי. אז היה הנוסח שבשעה 10 בדיוק הרבי היה מגיע ל-7:70. והאנשים היו מחכים בחוץ לראות את הרבי. לפעמים נותן לילדים שם הצדקה, או לפעמים אומר שלום או לא, ונכנס. הגענו ל-770 כמה דקות לפני 10, והבת שלי עמדה פה, ואני עומד פה. והרבא מגיע, מה האבא לא עושה בשביל הבת? כי לכם אבא על בנים. אני עזבתי את השורה שעמדתי, ונעמדתי מול הרבא. זאת אומרת, כשהרבא מגיע ל-770, הוא חייב לראות אותי. הרבא יצא מהרכב, הרבא הולך ככה, ופתאום אני עומד מולו. אז הרבא הסתכל, הוא הבין שיש לי חיה. אמרתי לו, רבא, זאת הבת שלי, שיש לה את הבעיה עם העין, ושאני צריך שיהיה לה רפואה שלמה, שהרבא יברך אותה. הרבא הסתכל עליה, ואומר לי, לבדוק מיד את המזוזה, ויהיה לה מיד רפואה שלמה, ושתזכה לגדל אותה לטוירו, לחופו ולמייסים טויבים. והרבא המשיך. אני מיד יצאתי החוצה, היה טלפון ציבורי, צלצלתי לבית, ואמרתי לרבנית שהרבא אמר שצריכים מיד לבדוק את המזוזות. ויש לנו סופר, שמעתי לקרוא לסופר, ומיד להוריד את המזוזה ולראות. בדקו את המזוזה, זה לא יאומן, המילה בין עיניך הייתה מחוקה. המילה עיניך. המילה עיניך הייתה מחוקה. מיד קבעו מזוזה אחרת, מזוזה קשירה. כל זה קורה בארץ, כשאני נמצא ב-770 מתפלל שחרית, אחרי איך שראיתי את הרבא, והבת שלי מחכה לי שם, היה מסעדת בן שונס, אני כבר לא זוכר איך שזה נקרא, משהו כזה, אתה מחכה לי. אני גומר להתפלל, אני יוצא, אומרת לי הבת, אבא, מה עם העין שלי? אמרתי, מה קרה? אז אני מרגישה משהו קורה. סוף הסיפור, הדבר נעלם. היא הלכה לנוח, כמה פתאום אין, נעלם, כאילו לא היה. יש לי תור אצל פרופסור גרינגלס, אמרתי לה בוא נלך, הוא מקבל אלם, הוא מסתכל, יש לו את הסכין, שם כל הבעיה שהייתה שם, המוגלה והדם ומה שהיה שם, והנה הוא רואה עין נורמלית. סיפרתי לו מה שקרה. שבועיים אחרי שהבת נרפאה והיה הנס הזה, הייתי בפברנגן. עברו 18 שנה, אני אורח כבוד בניו ג'רסי, נכנס בשבת לבית הכנסת, יהודי שעומד בפינה ומתפלל עם הטלית, רואה אותי, הוא רץ אליי, מתחיל לנשק אותי, מתחיל לבכות, ואני מתבונן, אני לא מכיר את האיש הזה. התברר שזה היה פרופסור גרינגלס. הוא אומר לי, אני ראיתי את הנס של הרבי מלובביץ' עם הבת, ראיתי שיש אלוקות.
Watch a glimpse through the...
So, quite an amazing story. And now that we know what a mezuzah is about, we know what the Torah says about mezuzah, we know the mezuzah is there to remind us and instill in us about our connection to God. We know about the power of mezuzah as that protective helmet through life. Let's talk about, of course, the most important part. How do we do this mitzvah? How do we do it right? So the first thing is, where you are getting your mezuzah from. Because as we already showed, mezuzah is intricate. It needs to be done right. It needs to be handwritten. It needs to be done on the parchment. It might look right and be very not right. Whether that's because it's paper, whether that's because it was printed. There were already incidents of people printing with raised printing on a mezuzah, trying to print them out by the hundred to make a quick buck. Those are not kosher. Whether the mezuzah was handwritten on parchment, but the quality of the writing is not good enough, and the letters are not clear enough to be kosher, or they're missing, or they deteriorated over time. You need to make sure that that mezuzah is purchased from a reliable source, that you know the history of it, you know you can trust it. That is something I'm happy to help with. Anybody needs a mezuzah, to provide them from scribes and rabbis that I trust, that have actually done a good job in creating a kosher mezuzah. The second thing to know about doing mezuzah right, and it's often overlooked, is that a mezuzah belongs on every door. People typically put a mezuzah on the front door. It's beautiful, identifies it as a Jewish home. But mezuzahs belong on the interior doors as well, and on the back door, and on the side door, and on the garage door. Mezuzahs belong on all the doors of the home, with the exception of the restroom or another such place which contain a tub or pool, and a place, in other words, that would be inappropriate for a mezuzah, or a room which is too small, because a room would have to be more than 39 square feet, or a 6 cubit by 6 cubit measurement, to be required to have the mezuzah. So a room that is less than approximately 39 square feet is not obligated a mezuzah. So a walk-in closet, sometimes yes, sometimes not, depending on the size. There's some exceptions to this, such as a foyer that leads to a larger room, but overall, a very small room would not need a mezuzah. Also, a mezuzah that doesn't have a complete door frame. In order to put up the mezuzah, we need to have a door frame, particularly a lintel on top of the door, and at least one side of a doorpost, usually two, to make that actually be a door that requires a mezuzah. In some modern construction, there's just kind of an open space and there isn't actually a door frame at all. Some of those do not require a mezuzah. So as you can see, these details get kind of specific. It's always a good idea to have the rabbi walk through the house and identify which doors require the mezuzah and which do not. This can be done virtually by kind of holding your cell phone and giving the rabbi a video tour of your home. You can identify where the mezuzah should go. So if you're worried about COVID or anything else, it can still be done. The next thing we need to know is how to put up the mezuzah. So mezuzah is placed, as you may be able to see in this picture here, the mezuzah is placed up on the doorpost, not more than a third down. So about a third of the way down, a little bit higher than that, not too much higher that it's too close to the ceiling, but no more than a third of the way down. And as you see here, the mezuzah is also placed on an angle, head first angle. In other words, the shin, where there's also the name of God inscribed on the mezuzah itself on the scroll. The shin, which is the top, heads forward into the room, and then the bottom is on the angle towards the door. This actually could have been done a little more perfectly where the door frame actually begins, but it's not that wide of a door, so that's all right. The mezuzah is on an angle and on within the top third of the door. Interestingly, a mezuzah can also be inside the door frame. Here we have the mezuzah as it's typically done on top, outside of the door frame itself, attached to it. But another way, as explained in the Code of Jewish Law, would be to carve into the door frame and stick the mezuzah into that indent that you create. Just don't make it too deep. In fact, you can see it here. This is a door frame that I've seen myself, and there are many more like this, in the old Jewish ghetto in Venice. Actually worked at the Chabad there for some time, and the old Jewish ghetto is mostly not populated by Jews right now, but you can still see in the old buildings, 400, 500 years old, that Jews used to live there. And into that kind of stone door frame or slab, whatever it is, they carve the hole for the mezuzah. You see the angle there, you see the spot where the mezuzah used to be, and there are, throughout the Jewish ghetto there, you can see more and more of these indents. So they were doing it that way, where you put the mezuzah inside that indent into the wall. That is another perfectly kosher way to put up the mezuzah. Now, another thing to remember about the mezuzah goes on the right side. So when you walk into the room, on your right. If it's on the left, it's not kosher. Sometimes it's hard to identify which side is the right, because which direction? One-way street, two-way street. For some doors, that can get tricky, and that's another instance that would require rabbinic guidance for putting up properly. It's also important to remember that the mezuzah should be affixed in a permanent way, in other words, with a solid tape, like mounting tape, or another strong tape, not Scotch tape, or nails and other something else that will hold it there in a permanent way. When the mezuzah is put up on a door that actually absolutely requires it, we make a blessing. And most importantly to remember, mezuzahs should be checked regularly. As a minimum, twice within every 7 years, your mezuzah should come down and be sent off to an expert scribe to inspect, make sure it's still kosher. As we've seen that story, when the mezuzah becomes non-kosher, when the letters crack, that protection is no longer complete. And preferably this should be done even once a year, or especially when there's something unique going on, if there's a challenge in life, or just an occasion needs an extra blessing. The Rebbe used to say for pregnancy, other such situations that we need an extra divine blessing, we should check the mezuzahs. So there was a particular chassid, a student, a follower of the Rebbe, who had a uniquely close relationship to the Rebbe. And when he traveled back to Israel, he asked the Rebbe to kind of assure him that when the Rebbe would come to Israel, the Rebbe would visit him in his home. And the Rebbe said, you have nothing to be concerned about. When the Mashiach will come, he will come to every Jewish home. So we hope and pray for the coming of Mashiach and for the better world that Mashiach will bring about, for the perfect, peaceful, happy, prosperous, healthy time that is the time of the Mashiach. And we know that Mashiach will come to every Jewish home. So let's make sure our homes are identified as Jewish homes by having the mezuzahs up and by having them up properly. Also, this time of the year, we've been talking a lot about the temple and the ancient temple in Jerusalem and what that means and how it was established, and etc., etc. Well, every Jewish home was like an extension of that temple and will be seen as that extension in that time of the Mashiach. Well, in that case, make sure we have our mezuzahs so that our homes are as Jewish as they really should be. And again, if somebody doesn't need any help with that, obtaining a mezuzah, putting it up properly, having them checked, anywhere else along the process, I am more than happy to help. On Thursday, we will not have the regular class, nor will it be the Wednesday evening class for women because of the 9th of Av. This is the day of mourning for the destruction of the temple. It's a fast day, and the day we read special prayers, which will overlap with the time of our class. So we will not have a class scheduled for Thursday this week. We will continue, however, with do-it-yourself mitzvahs next Monday, and I hope to see you all there.